Okay, well, we're here with Bishop Kevin Sweeney, and we wanted to discuss the Fall Plenary of the Bishops in Baltimore, which you just got back from. Can you tell us a little bit about it and what that experience was like for you?
Thank you, Jay. Happy to share a little bit about really what was a wonderful week, a real good experience. My third in-person USCCB meeting. My first two were virtual in November of 2020 and June of 2021. Then a year ago, I had my first in-person in Baltimore. Last June in San Diego, which was great, and now this past week. A new part for me of this week's meeting was I went down on Saturday because I was asked to be part of the subcommittee on the church in Latin America. There's 270 bishops in the country. I think about 245 were at the meeting this November, but a lot of work, as I'm learning, is done by committees throughout the year, and there's so much. We could put a link to the USCCB statement on all of the things that were discussed by the large body, but there are so many committees that handle different parts of the church's work in the country, outside the country, and so being part of that group on Latin America was a real insight for me. Some things I had heard before in terms of my experience with the community, but hearing some things right now in Haiti, there's a terrible situation in Haiti that the church is trying to help, and in Nicaragua and Cuba. So there's a few places where there's particular needs that the church tries to be there. And then really going back to St. Pope John Paul II in 1992, the new evangelization, and asking the church of the so-called first world to be supportive of the church in the so-called third world, and we certainly should do that as the two continents here in the Americas. So that was a new part of this year's experience for me. And then I have to say, I think overall my experience last November was very uplifting. The first two meetings I attended by Zoom, there was this discussion which had to take place about a Eucharistic document we were working on, and there was, if you remember, some press and concern about, sadly, Catholic politicians who are not necessarily legislating in conformity with what we teach and believe, and how that should be handled by the bishops in the church. And there's certainly many different opinions on that, and those were expressed in those two Zoom meetings in November of 20 and June of 21. But last November, they did something a little different. They started with a morning of prayer, and on that Monday morning, and then Monday afternoon there was what they call an executive session, where there was no media, it was just the group together, and there was great conversation. Not everybody agreed, but about how we should proceed. And there was also some concern in the media at that time whether the American bishops might not be following the lead of Pope Francis, and there was this call for unity. And there was a document that they were working on, and it had been revised just before the meeting last November. And then when the document was voted on, I think Wednesday, it was like 250 to 4 or something or I forget the exact numbers, but it was an overwhelming vote in support of the Eucharistic. And now we're in this Eucharistic revival, which was a big part of our meetings this year. So again, we could go on for a long time in terms of some of the topics, but I have to say then June was more of a prayer experience, actually, this past June. And now getting back to business this past November, for me, as still somewhat of a new part of this large body, it's a very uplifting experience of the church. We have problems and issues and challenges, but I think I get the sense from the bishops, both the newer ones and the ones who have been there a long time, we're trying our best to do what Jesus is asking us to do. And so it's a real good feeling to be a part of that.
Could you maybe share with us something, maybe something behind the scenes that we don't get to read about in the press, something that struck you or surprised you about this meeting?
So again, one thing I shared in a small group meeting was that I get the sense that the bishops as a group are working at self-correction or examination of conscience, or how can we do this better. And one of the things that has come out of recent meetings, recent years, is that just having the debates or so-called conversations with the whole body, and one after another getting up to a microphone, that we needed more of an opportunity to talk to one another in small groups. So they have now implemented something called fraternal dialogues, and so twice during the week we were broken up into, at random, groups of about 15 or 20 that separated in different rooms and spoke about the same topics and had that opportunity to kind of go back and forth, and then the small groups would report back to the committee and the larger bishops, the whole group. And so I think that's something that's kind of going in the right direction. I think it's a synodal experience of the church, and so there's definitely that response to the synodal invitation of Pope Francis. So I think that's a step in the right direction.
So overall, your impressions, I mean, is the church moving forward in a positive direction?
Yeah, there's definitely challenges, and I think you could look at things in one way and say there's a lot of negativity. The numbers of people Catholics attending church is down, and the belief in the Eucharist is not what we would hope it would be. But I get a sense of hopefulness, and I think for myself, when I go, I'm excited to tell others about what's happening in the Diocese of Paterson. And when you hear that from bishop after bishop, good things happening in their diocese. Yes, some dioceses are really struggling, but much more, there's a sense of a vibrancy in the church. Young people, they had a great presentation on an outreach to young adults, and two young adults who spoke to us, who were part of a year-long, even more, from Zoom meetings to a gathering of young adults, to listen to young adults as part of the church. So there's a lot of reasons to be hopeful and optimistic.
Great. And then what's your next steps? Do you implement ideas from the conference into the diocese, or is it more of you're looking to contribute somehow?
So now a lot of the things that were discussed will go back to committees, and we're working on the guidance that we try to offer for faithful citizenship. Is a document that's gone down almost 15 years to try to encourage Catholics to have that responsibility to be good citizens for us in this country. That means how we vote, and so we're not telling which candidate to vote for or which party to support, but what does our faith tell us about what are the most important values, and how that should inform us when we participate in the public square and in the life of our local community, states, and country. So there's some work being done on that document right now. There's this whole Eucharistic revival, which we're going to be hearing more about, and there's a lot of foundational work being done that's going to be communicated soon, working towards a National Eucharistic Congress, I think in summer of 2024. There was talk about World Youth Day, which will be coming up next summer. So plenty of work to be done, but a good spirit that we're going to do the best we can, and to be as that synodal call, that experience that Pope Francis is encouraging us to reflect on: encounter, listen, and discern, and so that we're constantly asking the Holy Spirit to show us and teach us how we should be the church here and now, today, in the circumstances in which we're living. And for us, that's here in Paterson, and we'll try to do that as best we can.
Well, good. Thank you so much for your time and sharing with us what that experience was like for you.
My pleasure. Thanks, Jay, very much.